We are moving into a very interesting, pertinent, and incredibly relevant conversation, coming from very experienced people in different areas of this whole topic of trauma and the intersection of trauma and meditation. And I love the title, Stories in Conversation, Holding Space, a trauma-informed understanding of the teaching of meditation in challenging times. And let me introduce them for you. So here we go. Murray is a meditation practitioner with over 40 years of practice, and he's an experienced meditation teacher with a professional background in adult education. Murray began his meditation practice learning from Dr. Ian Gawler, me too. He's a senior consultant with the Potential Project, providing meditation training in the corporate sector, and is an associate with Alleviate. As an adult educator, he has led the design, delivery, and facilitation of leadership and change programs, and he's an executive coach. So Murray's going to hold this space and facilitate, moderate. Thanks, Murray. Then Anton Eastick leads Insight Meditation retreats and courses at Melbourne Insight Meditation. As well, he offers Hakomi therapy, a Buddhist Taoist-based therapy for individuals, and relationship life therapy for couples. These forms of therapy are designed to be complementary with meditation practices. For many who meditate, there may come a time when the help of someone else is needed to free us from old patterns that bring us down and point the way to relational joy again. Welcome, Anton. Janet Etty Leal is an author, speaker, board member of Meditation Australia, and a pioneer of mindful education for children. Craig started talking about that right at the end, so now we get to know more about it. Janet's key focus is to bring mindfulness to life with heart, mind, and hands-on practices to connect to all children. Her creative programs are a fusion of mindfulness and positive education and have enhanced curriculum for thousands of students. She provides staff training and classes for students in all school sectors. She's presented at numerous conferences nationally and internationally. Studies based on Janet's books, Meditation Capsules, a mindfulness program for children, and a Heart Start for Life, great name, creative discoveries for young children, have been undertaken by masters and PhD candidates in universities in Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, the US, and Puerto Rico. She has been published in the Journal of Humanistic Psychology. Welcome, Janet. And Dr. Elinor van Ommen. Elinor is a clinical psychologist and an experienced meditator. Elinor has specialist skills in a number of therapies that incorporate mindfulness, such as dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, and acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT. Elinor has worked across inpatient and outpatient sectors and now works primarily in private practice in direct client work and also as a supervisor. Elinor works with adults and adolescents across a variety of mental health concerns, including trauma. When not busy in clinical practice, Elinor enjoys making music, reading, gardening, and finding herself some quiet time in nature. So welcome to you too, Elinor. I now hand over to you, Murray, and I shall put myself on mute. And
thank you very much, Caroline. And I'd just like to acknowledge Caroline's work over, well, a day and a half now, nearly. It's a very challenging thing, I imagine, trying to hold space in the virtual way for conversation about embodied meditation when we can't actually be physically present, and to be more aware perhaps of not just our own bodies, but the bodies of those around us. So thank you, Caroline. So I just want to do a little introduction to our topic today. Just to kind of sort of give you some context, but I did particularly like the expression teach with great care. If you were listening to the panel before us with Zane, Jonathan and Craig, that expression came out, and it was really in reference to when you are a teacher of meditation. And I guess this conversation focuses quite a bit on those of you who are teachers of meditation, that we need to teach with great care. And that's really quite a nice brief introduction, I think, to what we're going to do. But also this idea of embodied meditation. I really was struck by Brianna Bones' explanation of mind and body and earth, and embodied meditation, of course, connects your body with the earth. And I think that's a fundamental principle, I think, which we can hold in ourselves as we go through this conversation. So just to talk a little bit about what we're doing today, and I thought I'd start actually with a personal story, because as a member of the board with Janet, we've been talking quite a bit actually, about the idea of trauma-informed teaching. And when I was contemplating that topic and just reflecting on how that was, even those words impact on it a bit, I thought, oh, well, I've been meditating for a long time and I've been teaching for quite a long time, and I've never really thought consciously about that. I mean, am I actually aware of the trauma, or possible trauma, of those whom I'm teaching, but also of trauma in myself? And our panelists today will talk a bit about those themes. And so to share a personal story. So we all have stories of trauma and of suffering. And it is interesting to me that as an older adult, I have varying degrees of consciousness about trauma, about my own. And so just a little story, not a unique story in any way, but just to illustrate that we're all, of course, touched by trauma and informed by it. So when I was a young man in my 30s, my father died from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And it happened at a time, when I was 30, actually. My firstborn son was 6 months old. My work was becoming very, very complex, or much more complex. I had a mortgage to pay. So, all of the catastrophes of life hit you at particular times. And I suffered a great deal of grief through the loss of my father. And of course, I carry it now, all these years later, 34 years later. But we all do, which is my point, really. And of course, when you're teaching, you need to be consciously aware of the impact of life on you, but also of the potential impacts of life on others. So really, that's the point of this conversation. And I'd just like to hand over now to Janet, just to explain. We've got about 20 minutes each. The panelists will speak. We've got a generous amount of time, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity. But we've also allowed a reasonable amount of time at the end to deal with your questions. So as an audience member, please feel free to pop in any kind of question you'd like to at the Q&A. And Caroline's kindly agreed to attend to that, and we'll hold space for that at the end, if that's okay. So each panel member can go through what they would like to share with you. And so we're going to now start with Janet. So I'll simply hand over to you, Janet.
Thank you, Murray. And good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining us for this. I'm finding it an exceptional conference. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Karen and Lisa for their sterling, outstanding efforts to make this happen, and anyone else involved. Thank you so much. So I'm going to start because my background is that I used to teach art and craft. That's how old I am. And I can't resist making visual aids, because there's that saying that a picture paints 1,000 words. And I'm a consultant, so I sometimes only meet children once. So every moment matters for me. And I made this a sparkly question mark, because this is really the practice of mindfulness, being curious. It's such a strength, and we need to keep it alive, because then we are lifelong learners. And because I'm a consultant and I'm going into classrooms of children I've never met, I really can't assume anything. So I realized a long time ago that the likelihood is that some of those children may have experienced trauma or are currently experiencing trauma. And that can come in so many ways for children. It can come with experiences of being bullied. It can come with illness, with disabilities. And of course, it can come from home, with challenging stuff happening at home. So my work I think there was such a great introduction, Murray, because really we all need to teach with such care. You know, people are putting their trust in us. They're opening their hearts, they're sharing their minds. So this underpins all of my lessons. And because I do believe that a picture paints 1,000 words, I've decided to be your tour guide with some slides. So I'm going to use, and I set this all up, and hopefully it's going to work, because this is not what was meant to happen. But anyway, there we are. And I need to explain that I am a bit technologically challenged, but anyway, I've made my way. There's my slides. So I have been hugely informed by the work of Dr. Rick Hanson. And he says there are 3 basic needs that all humans have, and they are to feel safe, to feel satisfied, and to feel connected. And when I work with schools, I'm reminding them of this. And I'm also reminding them that mindfulness, we need to think of mindfulness beyond a practice, because it's so easy to timetable mindfulness or meditation. It's something that we need to be constantly remembering and be curious about. So setting up children by having someone greet them as they walk in the school. A lot of schools do this, by the way. Shake their hands, look them in the eye, smile at them. And if this kind of mindful warmth and compassion can continue throughout the day, those children are really getting their needs met. So it's not, of course, practices are wonderful, but it's more than practices. It's the whole culture of mindfulness that I'm trying to engender in schools, and even thinking of minimizing trauma, as in ghastly bells and crackling announcements hijacking their neurons. So I'm kind of going in there and really getting to think beyond the square, and ways to make the school more beautiful. Green spaces, bringing nature inside, getting rid of discord and clutter in classrooms. So, and remembering that it is not one size fits all. We can get very passionate about our practices, but we need to remember how they're being received, because every child we meet is unique, totally unique. They see the world with different eyes. They have different preferences. So really, I feel like I am a tour guide for them. I'm showing them where to look, but not what to see. So ultimately, what we are committing to is moment by moment, dialing in, and I use this term with children, we are remembering, and that's the key word really, we are remembering where our attention is, where we choose, and what we're doing with our attention. What is the quality of attention? And if there's a palette. My passion is to make mindful learning fun. It gives me such joy when I see children literally leaning in. I'm wanting to create fun, engaging experiences that they will remember. And I always start with their feet. So before they come in the room, they take their shoes off. And just doing this, starting from the ground up, Rick Hanson also says, we need to wake down. We need to connect to this beautiful body of ours. And so I spend quite a bit of the lesson reminding them about their body and to sense it, to feel it. So these children are noticing the balance point and finding their mindful base through the soles of their feet, and then realizing that we can change shape. It's so easy, especially for adults, to live in a rectangle. You know, we're lying down, we're sitting, and we're standing. But the body has this incredible ability to make much more interesting shapes than rectangles. So that can be as simple as stretching and then beginning to experience, so having first-hand experiences and noticing all the shapes and the inner states that those shapes bring of being stiff and stuck and tight, and the opposite, being totally released and free. And as confidence grows, you know, I can't do all this in one lesson, we can expand that palette of movement to really letting go and rolling around on the floor. And there's so many fun, and adding music to this just amplifies the experience. So I use anything from Mozart to Black Eyed Peas. And children, this gives them such a holistic experience. And we all know that saying that children and people won't remember necessarily the words you said, but they'll remember how you make them feel. And I've also been influenced by Bessel van der Kolk's work. And so it can be really quite dangerous with children that you don't know, or adults as well, to take their attention straight into the body, straight into the breath. If they have experienced trauma, or they have asthma, all kinds of reasons, breath awareness is something you gradually connect to. So I start with extraception, and then I work to proprioception, body and space, and finally to intraception. And so when you feel that it's okay, it's just such a joy to lead them into wild abandoned shapes with dancing. And I'm going to share with you, I'm very aware of the time, so that I make sure that I don't overstate my time in this session. I'm going to try to share some practices that I use with children, because they can absolutely be play-based. And then I also, really as a resource for my lessons, I have quite a vast library of books, some of them classics. I've had wonderful lessons based on Alice in Wonderland and the Magic Faraway Tree, but they're just endlessly captivating. They're not necessarily explicit mindfulness books, but they have so much to share. And an important part of my classes is unpacking the meaning behind and the insights. And that is not, I work with inquiry-based learning. So I am constantly questioning children. I'm their scribe. I write their comments and their ideas on the board. So the class is co-created by them. And also working very gently and with novelty on this external way of sensing before we gradually move inwards. So even something as simple as a feather, hearing the sound of it as it strokes down the ear, feeling its touch. But mind you, some children really don't like feathers, so I can never assume anything. I actually find that they don't. And so I often take in beautiful grass seeds, you know, those gorgeous bunny tail heads, those fluffy heads. That can be an alternative. I feel a bit like Mary Poppins, really, because I have a bag of all these things that I can resort to. And in our garden, we make a point of growing all kinds of wonderful plants, herbs and fragrant and flowers, and I bring them in. And that becomes, I'm constantly awestruck by their response to this. I feel like a lot of children now are suffering from nature deficit disorder. And Einstein says everything you need to know can be found in nature. I just love bringing nature into the classroom and giving them first-hand experiences to touch it, smell it, feel it. And these practices can, in their own magical way, can bring about a state of meditation. I mean, that boy, I can still remember that was taken quite some time ago, that photo. He literally, nothing else exists in that moment. He was literally just totally satisfied and connected to that experience, which is just humbling to witness. And I also bring in rose petals at that time of the year, and they spend time feeling them and looking through to see the transparency and touching. And this actually evolved to sitting with rose petals. And I always find that I hold my plans with curiosity, because sometimes I find that children have, had a huge week and they're actually exhausted. This was on a Friday afternoon. So I sort of changed my ideas around a bit and just gave them time with their legs up against the wall and rose petals on their foreheads. And they didn't want to leave. They didn't want to move. And because I'm an art teacher, I always bring pencils, crayons, and those kind of things, so that if I have time, they can do a drawing. Obviously, this drawing was not done during my lesson. I don't have enough time. But this girl bought me this drawing. This was her own expression of a self-compassionate portrait. And so it's just, it makes my heart sing when these things happen. And I've also learned, I've worked with some very challenging situations. I spent 6 years at Montague Special Needs School. Some of these children not only have cognitive disabilities and other disabilities, but have parents in prison. And I wasn't doing very well with these boys. They really weren't. They just seemed to think it was all a big drag. So I brought my dog in, and that completely changed. And mind you, that dog, she's no longer with us, was quite highly strung, but she really rose to the occasion, changed my relationship with me. You can see how close they were to me. And then the brain loves novelty. Children love novelty. So this is another special needs school. And I used with these children a great big piece of sheer material. And I asked them if that was okay. And they lay underneath it and experience cloud breathing and the touch of the material gently landing on them as they breathed out. So it's gradually making this journey, sharing this journey with children, where they actually begin to connect to the senses, and the senses bring them home, so that their body becomes a safe place. They can safely access their inner world. And as Philip Huggins said yesterday, meditation promotes friendship. And that is absolutely my experience. And it also promotes community. And it's a joy for me to see this happening in schools. It's also a joy to hear what's going home. I've heard many stories of children guiding meditation for their parents. And the greatest thing that children can really discover, just like a fig is a fruit that flowers on the inside. And that is my aim, in all kinds of ways, to help children realize that there is a flowering potential inside every one of them, and that they can realize that they are in good hands, that they can begin to realize that they can trust the hands that they're in, mindful, compassionate hands. So thank you for sharing that little quick visual journey with me. And I thought you'd probably be doing a lot of sitting, so I'm inviting you to stand up for a short mindfulness practice. And you might even, and if you actually wonder what your body needs, perhaps it needs a shake after all that sitting. So shaking out through one leg, shaking out through the other, through the hands, and then finding your feet. And I get children to, if they're close together, they're like a sandwich. If they're too wide, they slide. So just space underneath your hips, so they're holding you securely. And then notice your head, and just let it float like a helium balloon, because that changes everything in your body. Suddenly there's space for your heart. And then your hands, breathing in, slowly breathing in and making a quiet space with your hands. And when you breathe out, letting them slowly come home to your brain, to remember that you have a magnificent brain, capable of unlimited thoughts and kind ideas. Breathing in and out to your mouth, to remember all the kind words you can share. Breathe in and breathe out to your heart, to remember that you can always grow warm, gentle, kind feelings for yourself and others, giving yourself a hug, and bring your hands back to your heart. And we say good morning, good afternoon. And then it's one hand on your heart, one hand on your tummy. And I invite children to either look down, some of them aren't comfortable closing their eyes, or close their eyes. Little ones like to say the words out loud. So we all say, thank you, body. I notice. And we're quiet, because we need to be quiet to listen to what the body whispers to us. we're listening to what it whispers, noticing what it wants to share with us. And then we're going to just make a few shapes to clear some space. So one of them can just be this. This is a beautiful Qigong practice, which actually does wonderful things to the neural networks in the spine. Then we can swing our arms, all the effort's coming from the body, no effort from the arms. And then we can just bring our hands together and create some space through our vertebrae and sigh and let them go. Create some space through our shoulders. Breathe in, feel them under our ears and the relief when they fall away. Roll them a little bit. And then your head. Breathe in and open some space through your throat and let go through your neck. Floating your head back up. And finally, breathing in again. Imagine taking all the things that you no longer want taking up space in your body and mind in your hands, hold them, breathing in, and a big sigh. You can make a sound, ha, and drop them down to the ground and swaying as you just let any other tight, sticky bits drop out through your upper body, slowly rolling yourself back up. And another quiet space. Let your hands paint, if you like children imagine. They close their hands and they imagine what color is this beautiful mindful space they're creating. Hands coming back above you, sliding down to a hug, and then coming back, one hand to the heart, one hand to the tummy. Once again, thank you, body. I notice, and just spending a few quiet moments, noticing now the shape that you're in and your inner state. And noticing what you're feeling now. And even noticing that underneath your hands is your breath breathing you. And thank you for sharing that practice. And I'm just going to share another, my work is very much play-based. Another practice that I do with them when they return to sitting, they imagine breathing in and making a giant parachute with their hands and coming down to a soft landing. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. I wish I'd done that before we started. Perhaps we all feel that way. And as we were doing that, I was amusedly thinking about the audience because, of course, we can't see them looking funny, but you can see us looking funny. So I hope that you all enjoyed it. Look, just a very quick summary of some of the key things. One was that I think, Janet, you embodied the idea of teaching with care in your description of what you do. Just a couple of things. You talked about curiosities, teacher and student. And I really liked the description of gradually moving into the body and the breath. And as a trauma-aware kind of teacher, extraception, proprioception, and intraception is the pathway into carefully and gently moving into those areas of practice. I really liked your expression of inquiry-based learning, and it reminded me of what Hannah McDougall said yesterday when she was talking about inclusivity and diversity. What do they need? Not what do I think, but what do they need? And you're obviously asking that question as you go. Nature, earth again, embodiment, contact with the earth, fundamental awakening the senses. I really like your description of your flexibility to change and adapt depending on what you find. Much easier, I think, when we're actually physically present with our students, a little bit harder in a virtual world. So perhaps our antennae need to be more finely tuned. And I love the metaphor of the fig flowering inside. That was wonderful. So thank you very much, Janet. That was really very engaging and interesting. And now, Anton, we'll move to you.
Let me unmute myself. Thank you, Mari. Thanks, Janet. I'm really feeling the joy after that. I can really feel you embody everything you're teaching there. So it's such a sweet little feeling as you describe those things. Hi everyone. So what I'm about to offer here is a little model that we use in relationship therapy that I've been trained in, and what it's really all about is getting us perhaps clear about the ways that that care hasn't happened that we were just talking about, and then how do we what's getting in the way of it happening, and then how do we sort of encourage it to happen in the relationship. So I hope you'll see how relevant this is for meditation or just for your life, really. It's just I find it helpful everywhere, this one. So first of all, I want to talk a little bit about some of the origins of trauma, and just a very broad-based thing, just to carry on a little bit from what Janet's talking about there. So let me share a screen and just share a bit of a slide. So you can see that okay, Murray? This screen?
Yes.
Thumbs up?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So so this is a little bit about how trauma can happen. Like 4 basic ways within this model, and it's really important to point out the center part, which is the circle of health. This is an important part of it all. This is the place where there would be appropriate, say if we're talking about children, limits, nurturing, and guidance. That place where we're getting the love we want, we're getting the guidance we need. There's limits on our behavior that are healthy, even if we don't agree with them as children. So if you look at the line that's going up and down, top to bottom there, we can talk about this as like a line of self-esteem. And so when trauma happens, if we're down the bottom of there, what's happening is that the trauma that's happening towards us is a disempowering form of trauma. It weakens us, takes our power away. And oftentimes we kind of think of it like this. It's like it's a place where we're being put into a victim position, something, the victim position being a sense of like we're a small force being moved around or affected negatively by more powerful forces. So it's a sense of how it can happen in a disempowering way. But what's interesting in this model, which I really like, is that there's also false empowerment. And in false empowerment, what we're doing there is like, again, if we're thinking about children, there's a sense of we're not, we might sort of be feeding beliefs into someone that are unrealistic, and also beliefs that will, how would you say, it's like it's we're not letting the person, the child, know that there's negative consequences to their behavior at times, and that's sort of like false empowerment. It's creating a sense of grandiosity. So it's like the trauma is that we're being disconnected from our sense of empathy, sympathy. The more grandiose you are, the less empathic you are, the less connected you are. The circle of health, this represents that place where we're getting what we really want, which is connection. So on the other line here that's going across the page, on one side there's an abandonment trauma. This is where the form of trauma is that we're neglected. We're not being attended to in an appropriate way. And the other way, on the other side, is like intrusive, which is also, again, like a form of trauma that we really might identify with more when we think of trauma, the intrusion of, say, sexual abuse, emotional, physical abuse, intrusive. So So this is kind of like the way that it can happen. And with all of these ways that this can happen, we can kind of think about then leading into the next part where you might be more appropriate to your, say, meditation practice or to how you work with people. So something, you can think of it this way, that something happens to us as a child where we're more powerless, of course, because we're little. And then as a result, we decide something about us, about ourselves. We decide something about ourselves. For instance, if we're disempowered, and that might come in the form of like, oh, what's wrong with you? Are you useless or something? Right? Anyone know that one? You know, what's wrong with you? Never heard of it. Right? So then internally, and I'm talking personally here, this is one coming from my childhood, that there was a part of me going, oh, maybe there is something wrong with me. What is that? And it sets off this little search to try and find what that is and try to correct it somehow by being good enough, right? Seeking approval. So, and then that belief then stays with us all through life until we start to examine it, right? So we could become, if we're in that disempowering thing, we could take on habits of being pleasing, appeasing, seeking approval, all these sorts of things, right? The same with false empowerment, we might then have a sense of like we're always right. Anyone know that one? Like the sense we're right, others are wrong, and we sort of get into the self-righteous place. Okay, so if we're abandoned, we might then have the belief, oh, we're not lovable. No one loves us. And so it goes on. So there's lots that can be said about this, but let me just move on to the next bit here. And I'll just share the next one. So self-esteem, and thought of, this is just one model, of course, but you can think of them, we've got this line again. At one extreme, up the top, we've got a sense of grandiosity. And at this place, we're better, we think we're better than others. We're somehow, we know more, we're better than, we're looking down on others. Yeah. In the middle of here is the circle of health. We're not better, we're not less. Down the bottom end, it talks about toxic shame. So, and also, just before I go on, these slides are from the Relational Life Institute, where I've trained. If you're interested in that, you can probably get Terry Real's books. That's what all this work is from. So toxic shame is that sense we're turning on ourselves. It's hatred towards ourselves. So one, we're better than others. One, we feel less than others. You know, there's something wrong with us. Up here, up the top, there's something wrong with others. Something wrong with you. And the important thing here is the core energy of both of these is like a contempt. A contempt. The one place where we have contempt for others is like there's something wrong for you. And down the bottom is like we have contempt for the person who's looking down on us because they think, oh, how could you do that, right? But we're contempt from a victim place or contempt from a grandiose place. So let's see if I can go to the next one. So of course the trick is to get off contempt, out of contempt. So the boundaries then, if we look at boundaries, we've got the circle of health again, where we're protected and connected. Walled off is one side where we're just not letting anything in or out. On the other side, we're letting everything in or out. So we're connected and not protected. The other one, protected but not connected.
Sorry, Joe, we can't see the next slide. We're on the self-esteem, grandiosity.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'll have to just stop that and move it on. So unfortunately, give me a moment. How's that?
That's it. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so in this one, as I was saying, there's again the circle of health in the middle, where we're protected and connected. We can be either walled off or boundaryless. And the important thing with this one, I think, is that at times it's really important to be totally walled off. We're not letting something in if it's not something that's healthy for us, like some judgment or whatever towards us. And there's sometimes when we want to be boundaryless because we want to let the love in of our pet dog, for instance, or our loved ones or our children. So it's a flexible thing. We can move there as needed. Just realizing I have to keep moving on here. So let me just change that again. So then if we put all these together, we have what's called a relationship grid. Before we have the trauma grid. So at the top we have grandiosity, down the bottom shame, and then we can have boundaryless behavior, which is love dependent, they say. So it's like we're needing love somehow. And on the walled off side, we're love avoidant. We don't need it. It's like, who needs that? We don't need love, right? We don't need that connection. And so we can have these sort of quadrants then, what's important. So we can boundaryless and one up, boundaryless one down, walled off one down, walled off one up. And then so if we look at a more detailed version of that, then this is where it kind of gets interesting. Now, the important thing before I go further here is that this is prescriptive. It's not a sense of, oh, this is what you do, whatever. Like anyone can go into one of these quadrants. This is sort of like the other way around and the other slightly different slide. But so if we're in grandiosity and we're boundaryless, the behavior there is kind of like control, anger. And this is the area where abuse happens. Domestic abuse, physical abuse. If we're boundaryless and one down, that's where it might be a bit desperate. When we're desperate to get the approval of those who are not giving it to us, or anyone, right? Might be manipulation, might be a bit hysterical there. And if we're walled off and one up, it's kind of like we're looking down on those at others. We can be indifferent. That's where passive aggression is. The sense of we're looking at others with these words, you're not worthy. And then if we're walled off and one down, that's where we're sort of like our energy is quite suppressed. We're resigned, withdrawal, depression, these sort of things, right? So the important thing with all these is that when we're using in, say, the couples therapy, we just want to see, where do you go? In a way, what's your relational trauma? Do you get indifferent? Do you get passive aggressive? Or do you look at others like a sense of with a contempt? Or as a way of like giving up? Or what's the point? What's the point? There's no point in this. It's not going to work. Or do we get kind of desperate, trying to work hard to get what we want? Or do we just demand it? That's what, get off your ass and do this. Controlling anger. So all these, we can see like they're kind of like a relational trauma, a little bit more like with a lowercase t trauma in lots of ways. And these things, they just happen naturally because we haven't learnt another way. And it's natural, but it doesn't mean that it's healthy or relationship cherishing. So I think that's all I want to say. Essentially, I'm just giving a little framework there. So grandiosity, I guess the big thing here is impairing your empathy. And it impairs this realistic assessment of negative consequences. It impairs your ability to connect. We all know that sense of the guy who doesn't even know what he's doing to create harm. It's not just limited to guys, right? But he's not even aware of it. He wants to do the right thing even sometimes, but he's just not even aware of, like, why are you angry about that? It was just a joke, right? What are you, uptight or something? This is grandiosity. So the important thing is, what do we need to do to reconnect? Come back to the circle of health. This is the core of it. What do you need to do to reconnect? Do I need to come out of my depression and lift myself up? Do I need to come down off my high horse? Not to go into shame, but into health, to admit my bad behavior. Or the other one's to come out of the sense of being a victim. Do I need to sort of pull back a little bit from the amount that I speak, or do I need to offer more? These are all different ways of looking at it. So I think I'm on my time boundary, talking about boundaries, and I'll just stop there. Thank you, everyone. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions around that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anton. So maybe just before we move on, thank you very much. An intention here was to give people a model, so it's one that Anton is very familiar with, so that you can use that as both as an internal self-reflection tool, because in our conversations in preparing for this session, we were conscious of developing awareness of our own traumas and how that influences our behaviour as teachers. What do we step into and what do we step away from when we're teaching and we notice something in another, but also, of course, to be very consciously aware of the potential for trauma that others face. And so, Anton, just one quick question before we move on to Elinor. In looking at that model and that kind of the concentric circle of health in the middle, I'm presuming what a grid like that demonstrates is that we're not necessarily one thing. In fact, we may be all of these things at different times and in different relationships and under different circumstances. Would you like to just comment briefly on your understanding of that?
Other than, yeah, totally agree, right? And if we come up with someone who's, say, just really stuck in grandiosity, what we can do is actually sometimes we might just want to try unconsciously so we're not put down to meet them there and we get into a fight. Some would call it like a peeing competition. Like the Buddha called it, throwing flame at the other, and this is sort of like that sense of trying to dominate, right? Or if we could also, someone goes more habitually into the, say, the shame-based plays, we might want to sort of go down there with them. Oh, that's terrible, right? So, and then we get sucked down ourselves, right? So I guess, I think you described it. It's more prescriptive. It's like it's not sort of like a harsh assessment of things. It's more like no one chose this, right? We just grew up in a family, perhaps, where that happened, or a culture. So the idea is, what do I do at any particular time with someone, and then how do I come out of that to find a different way to relate, to communicate? Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you. And I guess as meditation teachers, we know from our own practice that self-awareness grows with meditation. So that's one thing. But what do you then do? How do you change your behaviour or take it beyond self-flagellation, for example, to something more effective and more purposeful? Yeah.
Yeah, because it's sort of like a diagnostic aspect, but then there's the skills building aspect. Different little ones. Could be about boundaries. For instance, if I said, okay, everyone at the end of this session is going to give me $10,000, right? You're going to say, I doubt it, right? No. But then I could say, well, everyone, you're all worthy of love. What happens then? Do you also keep holding up your boundary, or do you let it in?
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Anton. And just one reminder to people who are listening and observing, if you've got a particular question and you'd like a particular panel member to respond, maybe when you enter something in the Q&A, you could indicate who you would like particularly to hear from. Okay, thank you very much, Anton. Now, Elinor.
Good morning. Whew, what a wonderful topic. So trauma is a big thing for all of us on the planet, I guess. There's the little t traumas and the capital T trauma. It's not just a motor vehicle accident or a major singular event. You know, we can have acute trauma, we can have chronic trauma, and we can have more complex trauma. And I think we've all been touched by trauma to some extent. And part of this teaching with care involves us knowing ourselves, I guess, is this psychological clarity. What am I? Who am I? What do I bring when I'm teaching, facilitating? And how am I with myself? Because that kind of filters out. As was said earlier, people will remember how you made them feel often more than the information that you imparted. And that is particularly relevant in terms of trauma, because if somebody's going to be in a traumatic kind of response state at any point, they're going to be seeking to co-regulate, not intentionally, but it is the role of the facilitator to be there with care and able to look after their own central nervous system. So if somebody in a class that I'm facilitating has what appears like an adverse response, me doing henny penny the sky is falling is not going to help. Me pulling away, so we're here in this healthy, me being completely unaffected by it and pretending nothing's happening is also not going to help. So managing self is a huge part of healthy teaching and teaching with care, and this embodied compassion, embodied self-compassion is really quite vital in working with anybody, but particularly if you're in a setting where there's likely to be trauma. And on planet Earth, that's kind of going to happen, I guess. I was living in the US when 9/11 happened, and I mean, there was a global impact of that. I was in San Francisco, and myself and my friends had an impact, and for a while we stopped going near any monuments. There was a beach near Golden Gate Park. We wouldn't go there in case that was a target, or a beach near the bridge. We wouldn't do that. But my friends in New York had a very different trauma experience, but everybody was touched by that event. And I think the interesting feature of trauma is that it disrupts connection often. There's also space for post-traumatic growth, which is very healing, and I think that is the gift for anyone. And in a trauma that is like 9/11, if you weren't, that was almost an immediate coming together opportunity and an opportunity to create connection. But often trauma that is more private and personal disrupts that connection, which is why mindfulness meditation has such a role. And I've been very curious in this area. When I initially met trauma specialists, they would say they were quite anti-meditation mindfulness, and I was by that time a decades-long meditator, kind of going, that can't be right. There's got to be a space in here to manage this, potential for the quiet and finding yourself to disrupt something unpleasant. That can't be a totally no-go zone. There's got to be a way to meet here and bring the healing, because we need the connection. So I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but the first part of connection for me, let me see if I can swap 2 slides. Can I do this? Have I accepted? Can you see my screen? No, you cannot. Let me come back. Perhaps I cannot do that. I might keep going. The basic of wanting to recreate connection in the concern that there may be trauma in the room is really grounding. As everyone has already led up to, we don't go. I know it's often a common thing to think, oh, well, let's just focus on the breath, or let's just do a body scan. But those 2 meditations that we consider quite I don't know, basic and easy to do, can be very, very triggering, because a lot of trauma happens in the body. So it's much safer to begin with a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which I think most people might have heard. It's a very common kind of best practice meditation to bring yourself to, or bring the room to, a focus on the senses, because then we're looking at external rather than what's going on in my body, or what might be happening in a place where I feel like I've been violated, or I'm having a vague memory of having been violated. So it would be to exhale, not with an undue focus on the breath, but just to begin to focus on what are 5 things that you can see, not in terms of quizzing or interrogating the person. And if somebody's in distress, you would co-facilitate this. Oh, I can see the painting on the wall, and I can see the sun shining through the window, and you would step through this quite slowly, just to allow the person to collect themselves into the present moment. So it's 5 things you can see, moving on then to 4 things that you can touch. Might be able to feel the scarf around my neck, or I can feel the hand lotion I put on earlier today, or I can touch my knee and hold my hands. And we would move to 3 things that you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste, or any version of that. You don't want to get stuck in the opposite direction where you're trying to find 5 things you can taste, because that's not going to work. That's a bit of a challenge for most people, unless you really had a complex curry. You're not going to be able to taste 5 things. So, but it's a way to bring the person into the present moment, because trauma and memory, trauma not only disrupts connection to self and connection to land and connection to other, it disrupts connections in the brain, such that memory isn't locked in there in a healthy fashion. It's almost like it's a little it's like the war is over, but there's still landmines. And when you step on an unknown trauma memory, it kind of can shatter through the nervous system as if it's happening right now. So the first thing anybody in that response needs is to be grounded into the present moment. They don't need to be touched by you. They don't need to be, interfered with in any way or powered over in any way. So how you are with them is where the healing is going to be facilitated. I'm here. I'm okay. This is okay. It's 2022. We're in this suburb. We're in this studio. We're together. Everything's fine. So once again, the how you are is so important. If you think of if anyone's a parent or has cared for children, when a child is crying in a bassinet or a cot, you instinctively walk over and scoop them up, and you hold them close to your heartbeat, and you rock and you pat and you go, it's okay. Now, we're not going to hold people we shouldn't be holding, but that's how you regulate somebody who's in distress. You don't walk up to the cot and go, what is it now, kid? What's wrong? Or you wouldn't expect that to work. So the how you are matters. Similarly, you know, if you pick up a baby, but you're all like, oh, I don't know, it's very difficult to soothe that baby because they can tell. And I guess that's probably some of the most visceral training I had actually was early in my career when I was working in aged care. I got a placement in a couple of aged care facilities. And I tell you what, people on a dementia ward, they know what's going on, even though they don't know what's going on. They know what they're feeling. And you know, as a young graduate with all of these strategies, I wanted to try the strategies, and it didn't really matter. In fact, there was one lovely old lady who said to me one day, oh, I like it when you come here. The room feels good after you leave as well. I wasn't sure if that was a relief that I was gone or if, but I think, you know, she was kind of attuning to the energy and the I guess the general unconditional regard and respect that I could bring to her. So you know, we bring ourselves to the rooms when we're teaching. So bringing ourselves as our best selves, our healthiest selves is really important. In that space, we then have clear and correct boundaries. We're not, you know, if my self-esteem is out of whack and I'm running a class where, you know, subconsciously I need everybody to have a good time, that kind of influences the room, such that if somebody has an unpleasant time, which can very well happen when we're meditating and facing ourselves, they may not feel that they can bring that to us, and that's a shame. That's a big missed opportunity, because part of the duty of care, I think, is that someone who's had an adverse or just an unpleasant experience feels able to come to you and say, oh, I don't think meditation's for me. You know, all this stuff came up, and you would really like to have that dialogue, so then you can explain to them a little more about the process, so that you can pull out your referral book and say, oh, look, this can happen. You know, here are some really good psychs in the area, or here's a counsellor I know, or, you know, if the stuff coming up that you'd like to unpack, that's very normal, and here are some good places to take it. So it's important to have that kind of autonomy in a room. And you know, I love Janet's presentation. There's a lot in that that's applicable for adults, because we have the same nervous system. There's a lot of theory and a lot of really great writing on polyvagal stuff that really points out what is going on in the body in trauma, and the benefits of mindful meditation is incredible. So knowing ourselves so that we can be our best, clearest, brightest, that I can be there as a facilitator with my own stuff. Yeah, I come from health, but I'm not a finished product yet. So I've got my stuff kind of under my arm, you know, and if some of my stuff comes up, it's there. I've got it kind of in a loving capsule of my own healing love attention, that I will be attending to that again later. But in the here and now, if I'm teaching, it's about the people that I'm looking to reach, offer them an experience, and maybe open a few opportunities for them, so that my ongoing baggage, because there'll always be ongoing baggage, so, you know, I can take care of my ongoing baggage such that it doesn't spill and create more relational trauma for, you know, people like most of us who have possibly been powered over or somehow abused. The complex trauma is possibly some of the trickiest. Often a trauma that involves childhood neglect, I guess, where the adult memory is like nothing happened, nothing was wrong. They were nice middle-class parents. They, you know, I went to a good school, but even then, sometimes there's trauma, and you know, that's not necessarily through ill intent. It doesn't take a lot for there to be some kind of abandonment trauma. A mother with postnatal depression, or, you know, parents that have to work, and a carer who isn't able to show up. The absence of things is also a traumatic abuse. And you don't have to look far. There's some psych experiments that show, you know, the healthy bonding. There's a lot of mirroring, mother-infant cooing and responding, and things that we just consider normal and natural. And the moment those are removed, an infant will start to go into distress quite quickly. So that not having your emotional needs met is another form of trauma, and those wounds often will show up in that quiet of meditation. And we also have our own as facilitators that sometimes play out. So it's important to be aware of that. I would like to get to my slides if I can. I wonder if I can do that. Excuse me while I just have a little look. And I do not see share screen. There we go. How about that? Let me get back to making sure it's in a fashion where we can share. Sorry about that, folks.
That's okay. Take your time.
All right, here we go. No, slideshow it. Okay, how does that look?
Really good. We've got the thumbnails on the left, but we can certainly see it.
Ah. I think it might be sitting somewhere else on my screen. There we go. There we go. So that's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. As we went through, it's useful for most things, and it would certainly, it's well recognized as kind of the go-to grounding, present moment, not all about in my body, just it's very, very neutral. And if you're bringing a lot of calm as you deliver and co-facilitate that, it will help anyone who might be going through a bit of a surprise, tumultuous event. You know, people with trauma who know that they have trauma and are actively working on their trauma are probably going to be quite okay with meditation and mindfulness. It's just when there are surprise things that people think they're over or think didn't matter, that sometimes you can find a response in a class. And, you know, that can be a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. They're all kind of usually detectable that somebody's gone into a bit of a nervous system agitation, but also the spaced off dissociative stuff you can usually see happening. And also then the over effusive kind of, that was wonderful, thank you, you're wonderful. It may also be a kind of perhaps some underlying trauma. So it's always good to, I guess, be aware of trauma sensitive meditation. I always say start err on the side of caution. Assume that there is probably trauma in the room. If you're facilitating, always be clear about what to expect with adults. You know, oh, I'm going to do this. It's about 10 minutes, eyes closed or open, just so people are empowered, because trauma is a disempowerment, whether deliberate or accidental, whether it was, you know, an abuse or a life event of like an accident, the person feels without power. So it's important to be aware that as a facilitator, we carry power and authority at times that we may not be aware of. So always good to be sensitive to the power dynamics. Allow plenty of choice when you're facilitating. I would say always start with eyes open. And then giving options from there. To keep lighting natural, avoid very low lighting. A lot of abuse often happens in the dark, so that can be quite triggering for women especially, or men. But obviously allowing people to sit, or not expecting people to be in vulnerable positions, and avoiding extended periods of silence or body scan to build up to that. I know when I first started working on a psych ward, I developed this long between, just so that my voice continued, so that people didn't feel alone in the room, because that was extremely triggering. So always being sensitive to individual difference. I'm just ripping through here because we don't have a lot of time. I can supply the slides if you'd like later. Allowing space for movement is nice. Walking and movement is always obviously a possible part of mindfulness. It's lovely if you've got an area of the room where people can peel back to if they want to, or get up, or so that someone who's having a difficult time doesn't feel they have to kind of leave the room or make a scene or be lost to you for follow-up by leaving the room as well. Always flexible with postures, always letting people know it's okay if they didn't feel good. This is what was your experience, and to have that curiosity we were talking about before, that curious creative space is always vital, and is a trauma sensitive element, of course. As I said before, I think that make sure there's a culture where reflection and feedback is welcome, so that you maintain that curiosity as a facilitator. Oh, how was that for you? Not too leading in terms of you must tell me you had a good time, because I need to know you had a good time, because I don't feel so good about myself. So it's always about the participant. And bringing your most clear and authentic self as an instructor is a key part of that, and being diligent with your own energetic hygiene really is that before you start anything and while you're in anything, there is this clear boundary space of this is me, my physical body, this is my emotional state today, this is my mental body, this is my observing self and my wiser self, and all of me is here and centered from the heart, and I'm going to come to you with my highest and brightest. I'm not going to dump anything. I'm bringing my highest and brightest to your highest potential, and from there we can co-create. And that, I think, is an essential part of mindfulness in general, but particularly trauma sensitive mindful meditation. You consider that people in your care are potentially quite vulnerable. We're all quite vulnerable. And I think then we have this ethical responsibility always to bring our best. So that, for me, I think means that we're always doing our own work. I hope people are. I think people are very curious like that, and it's great to have a mentor or a supervisor or a therapist or someone where you're continually in a reflective space. I know I have a mentor, I have a supervision group I meet with regularly, and it's just so wonderful to have that reflective, creative space of what am I doing? How am I doing that? How am I being? How am I bringing myself? How are people experiencing me today? And can I bring more love, I guess, in that truly unconditional kind of sense of that wise parenting love, which is what is required particularly in trauma and in general, which is it's not gooey sentimental. It's a very strong but kind, compassionate space. It's the same space where you could move in close and caring, or you could stand back and say, put that fork down, don't shove that in the toaster. It's this strong respect of me and you, and the God within me greeting the God within you, really, in that true kind of namaste of what we're doing in offering to share of our own wisdom with somebody else. I think that is probably for me, one of the key things when trauma has been so much about the disempowerment of the individual and the disconnect from their surroundings, that we bring an empowering respect of self, which includes a respect of other and an awareness that other is having their own experience. So to be able to be in empathy rather than in sympathy, to understand that there must be some unfolding wisdom for somebody, even if they've had terrible experiences, that we can hold that space for them so that they can move through trauma and towards the post-traumatic growth that is so important. So when all is said and done, people remember what it felt like to be in your class. Did they feel safe? Did they feel respected? Is very important. I had a couple, I've gone too far, too fast.
Thank you, Elinor.
You're welcome. For any further, I was just going to point out the David Treleaven, Trauma Sensitive Mindfulness, is a wonderful book. If you're working in this area, I would strongly suggest that you have a read, or he has some nice resources on his website as well, and just some other good reading if you're interested, or if you feel impacted by any of this conversation. For sure, The Courage to Heal is a wonderful journey for survivors of childhood sexual abuse. Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score is a great book, and I quite like the Bruce Perry too. The question, as I think Anton had said, instead of what's wrong with you, it's like, well, actually, what happened to you? What was your experience, and how have you landed where you are? And so very so just a few. I don't know, I've got a bookshelf full of stuff, but those were the few key ones I picked off this morning that I thought might be of interest to share.
That's terrific. Thank you very much, Elinor.
Thank you. Sorry for the delay with the screen sharing.
That's okay. It worked fine. Thank you very much. We've got about 10 minutes to go. So rather than, I think Elinor's done a very good job. I don't need to summarize anything that you said. So thank you very much. And it's very helpful to have those references at the end too. And Caroline, I hope you've found a few questions that you may like to pop in and share with us that we can attend to.
There actually haven't been any questions that I can see come in, Murray.
There you go.
Yeah,
good job.
It was, for me, it was an excitingly fascinating and very beautiful curating, again, in the order of things. Like Janet's, took us into this extraordinary kind of childlike openness. I loved when you said the body is not just a rectangle. I thought, oh yes, how often do I not, sort of move beyond that? That was very striking, and I loved it. I was moved to tears numerous times during your presentation, that touching of something very tender and joyful and playful, so yeah. Anton's intellectual model that resonates so much in the way that actually we live. And I was taking notes going, check, yes, I do that. I know that. I've seen that, very, very helpful, yeah. And then Elinor, your wisdom and kindness, and again, reflecting as a facilitator where I don't, take care of the room in some of those sensitive ways. So thank you so much for that. I'm deeply, deeply appreciative. So I'm going to really hand to you for the last 5 minutes or so, Murray, and you run things in the way that you would like to wrap up.
Oh, thank you very much, Caroline. And look, I do have a question that I'd like to ask, and I thought I might ask this question of you, Elinor, as you're describing your attention to self and others, which I found really helpful. Bring your best self, do your own work, be conscious of how you feel, what your expectations are, no doubt your intentions too, and many other tips that you were giving. I was just thinking, in the way in which many of us are working now, when we work in a remote way, or if we're working in a way with a group that we've never met before, and it might be a one-off thing. I've done that many times in a corporate setting, and just not having access to data apart from my own perspective and perceptions, whatever it is that I gather. I wonder if you could talk briefly about how you apply that knowledge that you shared in that kind of remote way, when you just don't necessarily have the kind of quality of data coming to you for you to, recalibrate, to change. As Janet was saying, no, now's the time to do something differently. I'll not do that. And I can see in the room they need something else, or I need to change what I'm doing. Are there any thoughts that you could share too about that?
Yeah, with remote, I do a little remote work, and I require camera on if I'm doing that for that reason. So I haven't done anything beyond what I could see on a large gallery. So that's usually my first go-to. Is like, if you're not willing to go on camera, that's okay, but then this group is not for you, because I'm aware that in that deep compassionate space, sometimes people do open more than perhaps they intended to. So I'm quite insistent on that, and then I can usually see. I usually have some kind of registration, so it's not just anonymous drop in and I don't know what happens to you after. There's usually, I've got some kind of registration feedback, and I generally frame quite. If it's a first off group, I frame quite clearly at the beginning expectations, because many people think meditation is going to be relaxation, and that they're expecting to feel good, and I guess I frame up front what can happen when you start to go within, and that there's often a lot lying there that we haven't attended to, things we put in the back of the pantry thinking we weren't going to go there, that sometimes they pop up saying you. And so I make it natural, I guess. So that's how I've managed it energetically. If I were to do anything bigger where I couldn't see, I think I would be keeping it really pretty neutral as a space, rather than I'm aware that I often as a therapist, hold that compassionate healing space. I've had people kind of walk in the room, sit on the couch and just start crying when so I'm aware of not unraveling people when they're not in a safe space to contain themselves, or I don't want people opening a can that they can't handle.
Thank you, that's really helpful, Elinor. Maybe Anton and Janet, would you like to add anything to that question? Are you on mute, Janet? You're still on mute, Jen. That's it.
I ended up doing online Zoom teaching through COVID lockdown with special needs children. So my heart was a bit in my mouth. But I found one of the ways for everyone to feel connected was before the session. Well, but then this is very different though, working with children to adults, to go and find particular things. So they're all holding the same things. So that really helped. And again, an inquiry approach where they're all sharing. It wasn't just me. I never work like that. It's never just about me. It's about everyone. So that really helps online. But I absolutely hear what you're saying, Elinor. I've actually just recently done some training for a client in another state, and participants would not turn on their camera. And it's just it's like talking to the hand, really, when you're talking to a black box. So it's a very tricky one, and I'm not in a position to demand as a consultant, so it's just a very challenging thing. But I have found, and even for me with these sessions with children, and I really resist it now. There's no comparison with children to being in a room. But I still sometimes have to work online. So I even bring nature things in to show, and they have to guess what I'm showing them, like an avocado pit. So that gets them really thinking, and then showing them what happens when it's propagated in its little tree. So giving them examples that engage them. So that's just some examples of what I've done.
Thank you, Janet. And maybe Anton, and then we'll come to time. So just whatever you'd like to share, Anton.
I guess what comes to mind first is that, so those models, I don't show them to clients first up. You've got to know that too, right? That's further down the track, maybe 7 or 8, 10 sessions or something like that, right? First of all, we're sort of just working with the immediacy of what's here and getting a sense of that. So I just want to be super clear about that. It's more a model for me to work with in the background, like what's going on here, right? Getting curious, like in what sort of world does that behavior make sense? You know, that harshness or the whatever, so, or the longing or whatever. So that's first thing. So I think I think Janet and Elinor sort of really covered it beautifully. I think with the group thing, usually if I'm to say doing something with Melbourne Insight and then I really don't know the people, it's really about a sort of soothing, really, is all what's happening in lots of ways. A sense of letting people sort of come down and soothe what's there, like applying a balm. That's the way I like to sort of think of it. Yeah, any deeper inquiry work, that's something really more appropriate as time goes on. So I don't know if that's answering your question, Murray, but I guess a very broad answer there.
Yeah, no, that was helpful, and I think that sort of sense of teaching with care, which we started with, and again, thank you for Jonathan and Zane and Craig for bringing that little those words together, because I think that is what we do. If we bring our care and attention to what we do, a psychologist friend of mine said to me about coaching. In fact, he was saying, sometimes as a coach, you sometimes discover you're in an experience you've never had before. You're hearing somebody's story which is beyond your experience completely, and you're going, oh my God, you get that moment. And he always said to me, check your intention. What is your intention with this person? If your intention is clear, that's going to get you a long way. It won't get you all the way, but that's sort of, I guess, back to your point, Elinor, about, check yourself. Check yourself first. Are your intentions appropriate for the setting? And if you find, just really to conclude this session, that you are beyond your experience, then it's very important and a professional responsibility to hand on. Say, okay, this is not something I should be trying to help you with. It's beyond my skill and my knowledge and my capacity, but I will find somebody or help you find somebody who can do that for you. So, which is really the intention of this whole conversation, is not to say this is the answer to all the questions you may have and now you're fine, but to awaken in you, well, where's my level of knowledge and what do I need to learn more about and how will I continue to teach with care? So I'd just like to thank you all. I've found that a really enjoyable experience. I hope that everybody else has enjoyed it as much as I have. And Caroline, very happy to hand back to you.
Thank you very much, Murray. And thank you, Elinor, Janet, and Anton. I'm going away with one of the last things, which was be diligent with your own energetic hygiene. Oh, wow, that was a very powerful way of saying something that, I think I'm conscious of, but I love the languaging of that. So, yeah, great. Thank you.